party leave him, home alone he is left to sulk.
These are the days of our life.
Asking out the people them business.
These are the days of our life.
Harriet turned to Waterworld. Fantastic Four lost their soul. Divers take flight and die hard on Blue Horizon.
This Sunday, on episode 22 of Eye on Dependency, reality radio at its best.
Are healthcare workers at higher risk for drug addiction because of a stressful work environment and easy access to potent medication? Meet Kristin.
Hi, my name is Kristin. I'm an alcoholic, drug addict, and I'm also a nurse. I stole my drugs from the hospital where I worked, but my recovery is the real story.
There is also a possibility that medical practitioners can engage in drug diversion. So, what is drug diversion? Terri explains.
A healthcare worker, whether it is a pharmacy technician, a physician, a nurse, if any of those people that have access to the medications, instead of administering the drug to the patient, take it for themselves or sell it, then that is considered drug diversion.
Kristin and Terri will join us for this very eye-opening discussion. Listen live this Sunday from 10 a.m. on I-95.5 FM or watch live on the Eye on Dependency Facebook page or YouTube channel. Eye on Dependency. Courtesy the Counter-Trafficking Unit, Ministry of National Security. We don't just share stories. We change lives.
Eye on Dependency with Garth and Natasha.
Reality radio at its best, where every life is a biography.
Sundays at 10 a.m. and exclusively on I-95.5 FM.
And streamed live on the Eye on Dependency Facebook page and YouTube channel.
Good morning, Trinidad and Tobago, and welcome to Eye on Dependency, right here on I-95.5 FM, live on the Eye on Dependency Facebook page and YouTube channel. Good morning, Natasha.
Good morning, Garth. Good morning, Trinidad and Tobago. Good morning, world. Welcome to Eye on Dependency. We've seen us up close and personal today, something we did not expect, but it's a welcome change, I imagine. We do have an interesting program for you this morning, but before we bring in our guests, we do have a couple issues to treat with.
This morning, we're going to be dealing with addictions across the board. As you know, it's a mandate of our program, and it's one of the very few times that we are able to touch on this subject in total. And to assist us this morning, we have Kristin and Terri, who joined us via Zoom, and they are another part of the world.
Indeed.
Where are they from?
They are in the United States, and they are going to treat with our topic this morning of drug diversion. And we've had Kristin on the show before. She has told her own story of addiction and recovery as a nurse, as a practicing nurse, and she will tell us, refresh our memories as to what her story is, and also talk a little bit more about what she has learned about drug diversion. And of course, we have another guest, Terri Vidals, who is a pharmacist by trade and also a specialist in drug diversion. So she will give us the lowdown on what drug diversion is and how she enables her clients, hospitals and clinics to recognize and put systems in place to prevent and dissuade people from committing what is essentially a crime.
Now, folks, let us face it, and I would like to appoint a lineup video A for a minute from a please, because let me start with Tobago, and it's really painful this morning, really, really painful. We've had an dependency, one of the advantages we have is all week to observe, from people breaking traffic lights, like what we saw this morning blatantly, to a number of road deaths, alcohol use. There's a report of police and prison officer at some shooting incident at a bar last evening. But I saw me in Tobago this week. I was captured on video robbing a car wash. And when Shortman plays it, you'll see for yourself. We really want to appeal to everybody in Trinidad and Tobago today. Nurses and doctors are human beings just like everybody else. And we have to stop being in denial about our situation here in Trinidad and Tobago right now with regard to substance abuse and its related ills. We need to stop burying our heads in the sand. Meaning that since our dependency started 23 years ago, we have been pleading with Tobago. And folks, you wouldn't know how painful it is now to sit back and watch what is happening in Tobago when we tried to be proactive to help Tobago. And my question to this morning is, why are we so reactive? Why? What it is in our DNA that makes us so reactive and we don't listen? Is because Garth Sinclair don't have a degree? Because, you see, when I started this program, I felt that going for a degree would have been wasting the time that I had to be a town crier. If I'd only known that a degree meant so much here in Trinidad and Tobago and not the knowledge of the subject, I would have done things differently. Maybe it's because I didn't have a degree when Natasha has one, but I don't. And when we saw the situation in Tobago, before there was burglar proof, before there was one murder, we begged Tobago to be careful because you are going to run out of time. And yet, nobody listened. When one vagrant appeared in Tobago, we sounded the alarm again. And this is from since Mr. Ho Choi Charles was chief sec. See how far back? Now you want Trinidad and the commissioner and everybody else now to help you close the gate on a flood that is out of hand. We knew it was going to happen. We warned you. And it pains my heart today that you allowed it to happen. Now you're crying out for help. It is sad. It is painful. It hurts me to the core. And it begs the question about people like me who didn't need a degree to understand substance abuse. But I still went ahead and learned the theoretical side of it. Shortman, play that video and show people me in Tobago. Play it for me a minute, please. So here I am now, for those of you on radio, here I am running away with the drawer from the cash register, the tray from the cash register. See that guy going there? That's me. The only difference is I never used weapons, but everything else fits. Because I remember giving you all the fiasco with me and San Fernando General Hospital when I was chased and captured years ago. I told you all about that. Those of you who missed that, well, one of these I'll tell that story again. The thing is, that could have been prevented. Because when Mr. London opened the rehab facility, it was shut down again, never to see the light of day again. Because there were people in Tobago crying out for help. And it made no sense for them to come to Trinidad to do rehabilitation when they could stay right in Tobago, be close to their families. We begged you all. We pleaded with you all over and over and over and over. Nobody listened. It breaks my heart today to see what is going on. Now we had the medicine. Nobody wanted to hear because I didn't have a degree. But I could guarantee you this. Just like Nurse Kristin, nobody could tell you comprehensively about substance abuse other than someone who used it. If you never had a drink, you never had a smoke, you cannot know what the domino effect would be. It's impossible. You could only read about it. And that's what you just saw there. That was us back in the day. But we never committed that kind of atrocity. Why? Because the drugs back then had a certain, if I should use this word, but in this context here, quality. But now, things have changed. Now it's about quantity and making more money. So what happened is that the guys interfered with the stuff that they're selling, boosted it, and all other words
cutting it with other substances.
Cutting it with other substances, enhancing it. Let me explain to you all once again what class A drugs, not marijuana, not alcohol. These are different effects. But when you're talking about stimulants, let me see if I could break it down again. You see this in my hand, here's a pen, right? I could take this pen, take off the top, take off the bottom, and turn it into a crack pipe. I will put the rock on top, I would heat it, and then I would pull on it, and the smoke would come inside my system, and I would feel like I'm on cloud 9. But as soon as this rock is done, there's a crash, and I want to feel that way again. Same thing with gambling addicts, same thing with sex addicts. They want that rush, that adrenaline rush, that feel-good moment that the brain produces due to a flood of dopamine. We want to feel that again. If I make a black cigarette, which is crack cocaine and marijuana mix, and I roll it and I heat it and it turns black and I smoke it, while I'm smoking it, it feels so good. I'm floating on cloud 9. But as soon as it's done, I come back down to that horrible feeling I had before, and I want to get rid of that horrible feeling, so I want it again. So basically, I would need a hit every 5 minutes, 10 minutes. Depends on the grade of the drugs that I'm using. Why doesn't anybody understand this? Why didn't anybody understand that it's not so easy to stop once you start? Why doesn't anybody understand that I have a giant sleeping in me for the last 33 years? Because we never kill it, but we put it to sleep. But once we wake it up, I have to feed him for the last 33 years that it was sleeping. That means no more independency, no more Natasha, no more nothing. I have to go and feed that giant that has been sleeping for the last 33 years.
Unless, of course, you have access to treatment, which brings us back to the point that you're making originally, which
yes, but then I have to want the treatment and I have to want to bury him and put him to sleep. That plays an important role too in it. That's why Kristin with us here today, because she felt that way and she wanted to do something about it. Thank God she's a nurse again. But this is why we're here today. I'm appealing to the addicts and the families of addicts out there this morning. This is not a time to play. Your children are the next target, because just like companies do when they advertise on TV, they do succession planning as well. This is why we have a PSA to play for you sometime in the program when we approach an alcohol distiller in this country here to do PSAs for them. After severe arm twisting, they decided, okay, begrudgingly, let's do it. But one of the PSAs they did not want. Listen carefully. One of the PSAs that they told us not to play, it involves a mother and a son, that's the Roxanne Giallo who works here, and her son. We did that recording right when we were on Tragedy Road with Terri. And she came home tired in the PSA, and she was pouring a drink while she was pregnant. And the son told her, "Mom, you can't do that. You're pregnant. What you doing?" And he went on to explain fetal alcohol spectrum disorder to the mother, because Mr. Gart came to their school and told them about that. You know, the alcohol distiller told us not to play that one. I paused because I want that to sink in for a minute. You know, they told us don't play that PSA. That and another one that Kyle did in the bar when they was offering him a drink, and he told him, hey, police on the road, drug test, doing breathalyzer, I can't take no drink, let's go. They told us don't play that one either. Why you think? Think about it carefully. Why you think they told us not to play that? Well, we're going to play this morning so you could hear. Why do you think they told us not to play it? Short man, just play PSA B for me, please. Let the listener and viewers hear what I'm talking about.
Oh gosh, it really making hot today, boy.
Mommy, what you drinking?
I'm trying to cool down in this heat. Beer is not for you though. Only adults can have alcohol.
But Mommy, alcohol is not for you either. Pregnant women not supposed to drink alcohol.
Where you hear that?
Mr. Gart from Dependency was telling us in school about fetal alcohol syndrome. That's what babies get when mummies drink while they're pregnant. I don't want a brother or sister like that, Mommy.
Okay, you're right. I'll go drink water instead because I want this baby to be a happy, healthy child just like you.
Thank you, Mommy.
Drinking while pregnant can have devastating consequences. Think before you drink. A message from Eye on Dependency.
Why do you think they told us not to play that? Can you guess by now?
Oh, they didn't want their brand associated with that message.
Why do you think? Alcohol is a drug. It's just a legal drug, but it's still a drug. Why do you think they told us not to play that? Because they're too into succession planning. Because once you do that and give your child alcohol for the worms, you prepare them to be alcoholics, and chances are they might have that in their DNA, and it opens the door. And they told us not to play it. So understand, people, that it is also a money-making thing, and the target, they must continue to make money. So the drug pushers, God bless their soul, we don't know why they choose to have that means of employment. They're doing succession planning too. This is why children ending up in drugs in schools. This is why children have Molly and LSD and all of these things in school.
And in primary school as well.
And in primary school as that. So now we have to start from kindergarten to educate children about substance abuse, because we have to pull out the domino at some point. Why didn't anybody listen to this? Why would a state-owned agency, partly state-owned agency, tell us not to warn pregnant women not to drink and smoke? Come on, people, use your cabeza for a minute. We're not being alarmist here. We're not trying to create any bacchanal in our country that already up to its neck in it. We're trying to make a difference. And it breaks my heart today that with all that difference we try to make, things still, there are people who are still not listening. We can only try. You wanted to say something?
I just wanted to add that in terms of what people consider corporate social responsibility, I think this was an effort on the part of that company in particular to do that. But when it comes to alcohol and tobacco, unfortunately in Trinidad and Tobago, those industries benefit from
addiction.
The addiction. So they only want to have the drink responsibly tagline, because that absolves them of responsibility for what their product causes in some people.
And they didn't approach us, We approached them and begged them and pleaded with them. They didn't approach us, as we did other companies that flatly turned us down. They don't want to support a program like this. They don't want the name associated, the brand associated with a program like helping people to understand the product that they're selling. Strange, eh?
And that goes for the tobacco company as well.
Strange, eh?
which has just brought out a vaping device
And they
for
just,
sale.
yes, a vaping
ironically.
device for sale. And understand which is one of the items that are trafficked in our prisons regularly. How many prisons officers have either right now for the high jump because of carrying cigarettes in the prison? Why you think they risk their lives and career for cigarettes to go into the prison? Because it's a drug. It's a drug. How come you don't hear whey protein being smuggled into the prison? How come you don't hear broccoli and kale and cabbage and carrots and green apple and all of that being smuggled into the prison? Because those are not addictive. For God's sake, that is why we approach the tobacco company as well. But they refuse to play ball. So you and your own people understand it. If your child comes to you and asks permission to vape, with a case that we're dealing with right now, vaping came about for people who wanted to start smoking cigarettes. That is why vape was introduced. And we'll show you this morning somebody who suffered a lung collapse from vaping. This is not a joke. And there are teachers who see vape implements on the table because they could look like a pen, they could look like a flash drive, they could look like a highlighter. You don't know what a vape instrument looks like. And the same company just launched one and tell children, this is not for you. Really? Come on, people. We need to wake up. We need to wake up and understand that drugs have already won the war on drugs. It's up to us now. We are at war right now. And we are at war with people who don't care what... We've been talking about this. I had pure black hair on my head. Now I grey. For God's sake.
He has no hair on his head, actually.
I mean, come on, all you. Come on, people. Why is this getting so painful and tiring for us here in Trinidad and Tobago? Why? Why it's so tiring now talking about these issues? Because we don't think that people really... once it don't hit home to you, it don't matter, right? But alcohol is a drug. Nicotine is a drug. This is why officers get locked up, arrested and charged for smuggling it in prison. This is why drones were employed to drop them in prison. Because they're addictive. And when you take people away from it, they will find ways to get it. I keep asking myself, why are we even bothering? So Tobago, what you going to do now? Because addicts are falling off of trees now in Tobago. What you going to do? How are you going to stem that? You could put the entire Garden Emergency branch with the SIU and everybody in Tobago. You're still not going to stem the tide.
And that's the problem. I think the issue has escalated to the point now it's gone past the simple abuse of substances, and now it has gone to criminal activity involving guns, which is why now everybody's calling for heavier police presence on the island. But the problem started long before and could have been addressed in a more serious way by implementing what is, is common knowledge. You cannot fight a drug problem with law enforcement. You have to fight it with treatment.
And that's the next part. When I studied this stint in Trinidad and Tobago here, when we could have given the same stint to Center for Addiction and Mental Health in Canada, because they understood what we were doing and we were good friends with them. I say, no, Trinidad and Tobago is it. But in Center for Addiction and Mental Health, there are people with less who leave school with one subject, working now with the police. They're working with the police. The police have employed them. Not the people with the degree, Strange enough, not the people with the degree. You know who they employed? Toronto Police. They employ the addicts in recovery at Camage to teach them how to deal with addicts and other issues. In Trinidad here, I need a degree to do that. Why we didn't stay in Canada? Why I didn't stay?
Because...
Look how many years and blood and sweat and tears I give to this country. And all I have to show for it is grey hair. And a program, thank God, that the government at least see the need for us to continue to educate you. I apologize, not for what I said, but for having our guests sit and wait on us to do this. But we did tell them we were going to do this. And I thank them for their understanding because they're dealing with addiction too in their part of the world as well. And you'll hear about that after this break when we return. But again, notice, something has to be done about police officers or people with personal firearms going into bars in our country. Something has to be done about it. Because around 11:30 p.m. last evening, an officer, name called, number given, an off-duty police officer attached to the TTPS polygraph unit armed with a police-issued pistol with 45 rounds.
What?
45 rounds of 9mm ammunition was a lineman at R&R Bar located at 6th Avenue on 11th Street, Bath area.
Is he on duty?
Off duty. In an open
Why
area.
is he carrying his firearm then? Sorry. Sorry.
Listen, in an open area close to the restroom where he observed a female wearing a black short dress walk past him quickly, constantly looking back, heading towards the restroom area. He subsequently saw a man of African descent dressed in a colorful t-shirt together with another female also heading to the restroom area. Their actions made him suspicious and he followed them to the restroom to inquire what was taking place. He observed the man in the colorful t-shirt who walked past him earlier, pushed the female who was with him and continued along the corridor heading to the restroom. He approached the said man who was standing in the corridor, which was modestly lit from lighting fixtures, and told him, "You cannot come here," and advantage somebody with his trippiness. The said man then held on to the jersey of the PC and pushed him against the lady's toilet door. The PC pulled away and then told the man, "Is police you're assaulting here, boy?" The PC heard a door open, causing him to look in that direction briefly, and upon turning into the direction of the said man who was standing close to proximity to him, saw the man pointing a black object resembling a firearm at him, which caused him to become fearful for his life. So, to make a long story short, somebody pushed the officers. Turns out the guy was a prison officer.
Wow.
Shot was fired in the air. Hope nobody got injured because it hit the ceiling, etc., etc. Where that happened? In a bar. Maybe we should start looking at regulations now, because when Dr. Rowley spoke about safe zones, people came down on him for it. There's a name for zones with no fire. You're not allowed to go fire.
Free zones. But
right.
You would expect that an officer of the law has more sense than that, than to go into a bar where people are consuming alcohol with your firearm loaded. What are you doing? What is he doing? You expect a law enforcement officer to know better than to do that, right?
No, Natasha.
So apart from those firearm-free zones, that is for civilians clearly, because you don't expect police officers to be carrying on like that.
Natasha, the problem is, you're not going to get the blame again, the Commissioner of Police and the Minister of National Security. When people who have FUL, there's a certain level of responsibility that comes with that. Now, you hear the argument as what happened when the last police officer got shot in the bar, that police people need to protect themselves. Okay, all well and good, but you know what's the dangerous point here?
Everybody walking around with guns.
In an alcohol zone.
Correct.
Consuming alcohol. And when people tempers flare, when they get angry, that drug takes over. Remember, it's spirits that they're consuming, and different spirits will emerge when angered. Now, this is where the individual has to make a decision. Either lodge your firearm when you're in a watering hole, and you give the bartenders authority to. I'm just throwing out ideas here, but definitely there's something needs to be done to curb this situation that exists. Because without their firearms, they're vulnerable, right? And the people who may have to defend will be vulnerable. There's that argument. But then, how much should a person drink while carrying a firearm is another argument. And we need to take a look at all of these issues.
You know that my position on that. We have our two guests from the United States of America where people are allowed to carry firearms. Is that what and we see the number of firearm-related deaths that take place in America every day, every second. Is that what we want for Trinidad and Tobago, for everybody to have a gun? That's right. My position on it is that, I mean, the very freeness, now that the so-called crime rate is up and everybody wants to protect themselves with a firearm now. So everybody has one. So you are not safe regardless of whether you have a firearm or not. You're not safe because wherever you go, you're likely to suffer the consequences of somebody else needing to protect themselves.
Let's go to a break. And let's return with our guests. Let's start this program this morning.
Yep.
To you medical professionals out there, this is your turn to listen and learn.
So if you are or you know of someone who is working in the healthcare sector, whether as a doctor, physician, a nurse, a pharmacist, whatever role you play, this program is for you, and we want you to tune in to this very important issue, which we feel needs to be addressed in Trinidad and Tobago.
And to all you addicts and families of addicts out there, recovering or active, I have something to say to you just before we end. It's for you too this morning. You're listening to Dependency. You can join us live on Dependency's Facebook page or YouTube channel. Please remember to like and subscribe while you're there. We take a break. We'll be back.
Calling all young voices. Calling all young voices. The Ministry of National Security Counter-Trafficking Unit presents Voices Against Human Trafficking, a spoken word competition in commemoration of World Day Against Trafficking in Persons 2024. We invite all secondary school students, forms 2 to 4, across Trinidad and Tobago to join the fight with your powerful words. Submit your 5-minute spoken word pieces by Friday, June 7th, 5 p.m. Top prizes include an iPhone 15, iPad Air, and Beats headset. Plus, there's also a People's Choice Award. Submissions should be in video format, accompanied by a written script sent to countertraffickingunit@gmail.com. Let's raise our voices and ensure no child is left behind. For more information, contact the CTU at 627-1339. Approved by the Ministry of Education.
The sex trafficking thing is a serious thing, you know, boy.
Sex trafficking? I thought it was only human trafficking it have.
But what do you mean?
No serious thing, boy. Where you get that from? I don't know about human trafficking, you don't know about sex trafficking.
So how can you spot and identify perpetrators and children who are victims of trafficking? Many victims who are children do not look like under 18 years old. Child victims often move escorted around alone or in small groups. They also live in shared and even packed rooms and have very little clothing and belongings. Child victims are often seen with adults who are not their parents, their relatives, or their caregivers. Migrant children are often unaccompanied and separated from their parents. Child victims are often engaged in work that is not suitable for children. They are often deprived of their freedom to go to school, to play, and to enjoy being a child. Perpetrators have unexplained sources of income and possessions. They are businessmen and businesswomen running legitimate and illegitimate businesses. Perpetrators may appear to be the victim's friend, boyfriend, close relative, or employer.
We are the Counter-Trafficking Unit of the Ministry of National Security, Trinidad and Tobago, safeguarding human life.
Eye on Dependency with Garth and Natasha.
Reality radio, at its best, where every life is a biography.
Sundays at 10 a.m. and exclusively on I-95.5 FM.
And streamed live on the Eye on Dependency Facebook page and YouTube channel.
Thank you for staying with us. This is Eye on Dependency. And remember, if you're tuned in on our Facebook page or YouTube channel, please like the live. That helps us to boost the show and helps us to stay on the air. So please press that like button, whether you're on Facebook or YouTube.
This morning, Kristin and Terri, thank you very much for listening to my rant here this morning and the patience you displayed here. Thank you so much. I sure you all will understand why. But thank you once again. Could you say good morning to the people of Trinidad and Tobago so they make sure everybody can hear you?
Good morning. I appreciate your passion, Garth.
Thank you.
Good
Kristin?
morning. I'm grateful to be back.
Yes, thank you for agreeing to be
Glad
back
to
with
have
us.
you.
Yes, so you all are going to make us understand certain things about the health sector this morning. Our personnel here are bombarded with, it went from COVID straight to a crime situation that every minute somebody is going to the hospital for a gunshot wound, no matter what part of Trinidad and Tobago they work. And they day or night, our medical professionals are under pressure. Kristin, you felt that pressure back when you started as a nurse. Tell us, for the benefit of our people who are hearing you for the first time, and to all our guests, please welcome to all our guests on people on Facebook and YouTube or subscribers. Please say hello and welcome our guests. Give them a nice Dependency family welcome. Yes, Kristin, tell us, please, how did you find yourself on our program?
That is a long story, but I'll give you the Reader's Digest version, so to speak. It's a heavy topic we're talking about today, and I feel your frustration, Garth. But to both of you, thank you for having Terri and me here today so that we can maybe shed a little bit of hope on the situation. I heard you say, Garth, that you don't think you've made a difference or you don't think you're making any difference, but I disagree with you. I think you're making a difference one person at a time when you share your story, when you bring light to this topic, when you try to help others see a better way. So I do think you're making a difference. But
thank you, Kristin. Thank you.
My story starts really back in college with alcohol. As you say, alcohol is a drug. I had a lot of anxiety in college. Before college, I was pretty, I lived at home. My parents took care of me. I was fine. I didn't drink. I didn't really do anything too crazy, although I was a teenager. But once I got to college, I went away to college, about 200 miles away from home, which isn't all that far, but it felt far. And I was really not prepared to take care of myself. I had a lot of anxiety, was introduced to alcohol. We would go out on the weekends and have a good time together, my friends and I. And I found that alcohol made all of that anxiety and fear and nervousness I had, really made it go away for a while, at least, while I was drinking. So I found myself seeking out more opportunities to drink. I drank more than my peers did. I didn't really get in any trouble necessarily, but I didn't do well in some classes. It ended up taking me 6 years to get my 4-year degree. But I did graduate, mostly because I had my first daughter while I was in college. I did not make good decisions while I was drinking, and I ended up pregnant. Although at the time it seemed like that was really bad, and it was going to be, a terrible thing. This was going to be, how am I ever going to do this? It really ended up to be the best thing that happened to me. Having my first daughter, her name's Jessica, really enabled me to kind of clean up my act for a while so that I could graduate. This was back in 1991. I graduated and I moved back home or near home to start my nursing career. I didn't drink a whole lot. Too soon after I graduated, I was, really focused on my job and taking care of my daughter, and things were okay for a while. But then I started dating my first husband, and he drank a lot. And so I started drinking again. And again, I didn't really get in any trouble for it, but I certainly drank more than my peers. I drank more than I should have. And it affected my relationship with my daughter because in the mornings I didn't feel well and I laid around and she had to, kind of fend for herself. And it wasn't a great situation, but nothing terrible happened. Fast forward to like 1997, and I had a surgical procedure, and I was prescribed Percocet, which is an opioid medication. And that was the first time I had anything like that. I found that I really liked the way it made me feel. And what I liked about it was that I got the same effects as I did from alcohol in that it made me feel better. It made my anxiety go away. It just made me feel normal. Life was very stressful then. My first husband was not a nice person. And taking those pills made all of that kind of go away, at least for a little while. So I found myself seeking out more of those pills in the next few years. I would go to my doctor and fake back pain and kind of limp around, and she would give me pain pills, Vicodin usually, more opioids. My husband was a carpenter, and he would hurt himself sometimes. He'd go to the emergency room and he would get pills, and he'd share them with me. Oxycontin, another opioid. So I did that kind of thing over the next 3-ish years. And then around the year 2000, I had my second daughter that year, and I was working in an emergency department. So life was even more stressful now because I had 2 daughters. My husband was not nice. He was not a nice person to live with. He wouldn't allow me to put my daughter in daycare, so I had to stay up with her after working all night shift, and it just was a really hard time. So I found myself one day in the emergency room after a case was finished. I had leftover opioids. It was IV. I don't remember exactly what it was, or I don't remember which opioid it was, but it was an opioid. And I took that drug home instead of wasting it in the proper way. Typically, when you have leftover of those medications, in the US, we call them controlled substances. I think you guys call them you have them under classes, but I was supposed to waste that with another nurse. And so what I would do is I would take, at the time we had paper, now we have these fancy machines, but I would take my paper to my coworker friend and say, hey, can you sign off on this medication? I wasted it. And for the most part, they would sign it off without questioning me. But I really hadn't wasted it. I had put it in my pocket to take home and use it at home. So I started doing that. And really the first time I took that IV drug was very similar to the first time I took the pills, where it just made me feel so much better. But what was different, of course, is that the IV drug was an immediate feeling. It didn't last as long, but I felt immediate relief. And from that point on, I took every wasted medication I had. So instead of wasting it, I would take it home for the next 3-ish years. That went undetected. Nobody ever questioned me. And I mean, I worked in a hospital where it was a pediatric hospital. So we had small patients and we had over medication. So again, I would take every bit I had left over, I would take it home instead of wasting it the way it was supposed to. Well, one year in 2003, I had leftover fentanyl. I imagine everyone's heard of fentanyl these days. It's everywhere. At the time, though, it wasn't. This was, 2003. Nobody really had heard of fentanyl unless they use it in the hospital. I was taking pharmaceutical grade, if you will, fentanyl. That we used for our trauma patients, our patients that were intubated and needed to be sedated. And the first time I took that fentanyl, my reaction was very much the same from the other times when I first took the IV medication or first took those opioid pills. But the fentanyl is so much stronger. So not only did I have that immediate relief from all of the anxiety and stress that I was feeling, I had I had to have more of that, like an immediate craving for more. In other drugs that I took that weren't fentanyl, I wanted more, but it was very different after taking that fentanyl. It was such a strong craving that I could no longer deny myself anything when I was at work. So if I didn't have any leftover medication from a case, I started stealing it from the stock. It doesn't take them long to figure out what's going on when you're actually stealing the medication from the cabinet without having a patient to sign it out to. It did take them, I think, about 9 months to figure out that it was me, because there were a lot of other nurses working with me. But they figured it out. They figured out it was me. I had been on a vacation, and there was nothing missing when I was gone on vacation. But when I came back, there was some missing again. And so they knew then that it was me. The next night after that, after they really confirmed it was me, the next night I worked, I was met at the door by my manager. I worked night shift on the weekends. My manager was never there. It's kind of why we like working those shifts. But the minute I saw her, I knew that they had discovered it. I mean, I knew right away that that's what the issue was. But I tried to kind of pretend like, oh, what are you here for? What's going on? So she took me into a big conference room with a bunch of people there. There was a sheriff's deputy in the corner who had a gun on his belt. There was a detective. There was our chief nursing officer, our director of security, our director of human resources, the director of pharmacy. I can't even remember all the people that were there, but all these people that I didn't know, but they introduced themselves as they went around the table. They confronted me. That detective led that interview, and they confronted me with what they had discovered. I really was in panic mode, so I just denied everything. I could not bring myself to say, yes, you're right. I've been doing this. I need help. So they suspended me, and my manager gave me a box of all the stuff from my locker, took my pager, and security escorted me to the door. And they put me out. It was 9:00 on a Sunday night. I was just in such a state of panic and fear, and I had no idea what I was going to do or where I was going to go. I drove around for a couple of hours, ended up at a friend's house who let me stay the night. I did not want to go back home because I didn't want to have to explain to my family why I was home. Like, I couldn't fathom having to tell somebody what I had been doing for the last how many years. So after a day or two, reality kind of sunk in, and my panic and fear calmed down a little bit, not a lot. I told my family what was going on. I got myself a lawyer who was actually a family friend, and I decided I had to come clean. I had to confess. I could not live with the guilt that I felt. I had really never done anything wrong before. I didn't even have a speeding ticket. Like, I obeyed the law. So this was not something I was comfortable living with. Like, once it was out in the open, I couldn't deny it anymore. I had to be rid of it. It was so heavy to carry. So my lawyer and I went back to that detective that had led that interview, and I confessed everything that I had been doing. I ended up getting charged with 26 felonies. I don't know what it's like there, but felonies are like the worst of the what do you call it? Charges that you can get. And so I ended up, after going back and forth with plea agreements and lawyer stuff, I don't understand all of that, but they ended up just offering me a misdemeanor and some probation. So really getting rid of all of those felonies and just having a very minor, and not very minor, but a less serious offense on my record. But I had to turn in my nursing license. I had to, what do you call it? I had to turn it in, and they suspended it. So I was no longer a nurse. I had lost my job at the hospital, of course, and had no idea what I was going to do to support myself. So I felt a lot of relief after the court stuff was kind of worked out pretty much. And I just had probation. And I found a job as a medical secretary in a doctor's office. And I was really grateful for that. So grateful, because it was still in the healthcare field. I was making a lot less money, but at least I was still able to work. Excuse me. And what I hadn't done in those months, so I got fired from and found out in July, and I started working in this doctor's office in October, so it was about 3 months. In those 3 months, what I didn't do was get help for my problem. I did the court stuff. I tried to go to Alcoholics Anonymous, but I was not able to really surrender to that process. I really felt like an outsider, like I didn't fit in. I felt very uncomfortable. So I was never really able to, be open and honest about how I was feeling, what was going on. I couldn't afford treatment because I had lost my job and I lost my insurance. And treatment here is extremely expensive. I had gone through a divorce, so I was a single mom with 2 kids, so I had no means to get any treatment. So it's October, I'm working in this doctor's office, and one of my jobs was to call in prescriptions for the patients. So he handed me a prescription for Vicodin, again, an opioid, and asked me to call that to the pharmacy for this patient. So I did that and realized how easy that was. And not too much later after that, I went into a side room and started calling in prescriptions for myself under this doctor's name. This very kind doctor who gave me a chance, knowing my history, gave me a chance, at this job and to be employed again. So to thank him for that, I kind of stole his information so that I could call in prescriptions and get pills for myself. So that started a whole nother obsession with me, the pills, and then I would drink too. I was on probation. I'm not allowed to do any of that while I was on probation. So even though I knew that if I got caught doing this, I was going to be in a lot of trouble, I could not stop doing it. And calling in those pills got closer and closer together. I would call myself in another prescription. By January of 2005, I had called myself in a prescription, and 4 days later, I was calling in another prescription. I had taken all the pills in those 4 days. They called the pharmacy called the doctor's office and said, "Hey, we just want to verify this prescription because it's only been 4 days." And he happened to answer the phone and said, "Yeah, I did not call that in for her." And they're like, "Well, what about these other 8?" He said, "I've never called in a prescription for her." So when I went to pick up that prescription, the police met me at that pharmacy and arrested me. They took me to jail. I was incarcerated for about 4 months, a couple days shy of 4 months, and charged again with 9 felonies, 1 for each prescription they could prove I called in, and was just completely at my bottom, that, rock bottom that people say you have to hit. That was mine. I hit it. I am a felon. I ended up with that. They took the 9 felonies down to 1. So it's just 1, but it doesn't matter. It's still a felony. And again, spent that time in jail. That was my bottom. I did not like jail. Never wanted to go back there again. So I've really spent the last 19 years rebuilding things and making a life that I can be proud of and doing things to help others, which in turn helps me and keeps me in recovery. Thankfully, I've not returned to any kind of substance use since that time, so since January of 2005. But it's been a lot. It's been a long road.
Kristin?
Do you continue on, or do you want to?
Yeah, well, I'm just about to let people know, if you're just joining us, which some of you did, you're listening to Dependency, of course, and Kristin has just given us, who is on video call with us, has just given us a comprehensive step-by-step explanation on addiction.
Yep.
Couldn't want it better than that.
Yep.
And I am absolutely 150% sure we have medical personnel in our country right now going to the same thing. It is just, I don't know if you know or if you care to admit it, but I'm sure that our medical professionals, some of them have experienced or just experienced or experiencing what Kristin just explained. But the only thing is, Kristin's news was all over the world. You just Google her name and you would see. Her face would come up and they would tell you everything, because that's how they do business out there. Here we want to hide it. We'll deal with that in a moment. But yes, Kristin, thank you. But just to wrap up, because we have Terri, who is patiently waiting. And Terri, once again, we thank you for your patience, because Terri will tie this into drug diversion and how it happens, because she will explain. Right, Natasha?
Yeah.
So,
Thank you, Kristin, again for sharing that with us. And I'm sure, as Garth said in his introduction, there are a lot of parallels, regardless of the substance or activity that people are addicted to. It often, takes the same kind of trajectory. So thank you again for sharing that.
Before we go to Terri, Kristin, could you tell us now, for those who listening now and they decide, okay, yes, I identify with everything Kristin said, what can I do? What did you do?
Well, so I got therapy. I joined a treatment program. I got therapy, which was a great first step. And then a couple years into therapy, my counselor encouraged me to call the Board of Nursing. I live in Wisconsin in the U.S. And encouraged me to try and get my nursing license back. So I did that in 2007. And they, with a lot of monitoring, urine drug screens, making sure I'm doing my treatment program and going to AA meetings, they make sure it's a monitoring program, they call it. I joined that program, got my nursing license back, and with a lot of restrictions, there's a lot of things that you can't do when you first get your license back. Understandably, can't work with those medications that I was addicted to. I can't work alone. I have to be supervised, that kind of thing. So I got my nursing license back and returned to nursing. And then in some of the work that I do today, I found out that there are other states in the U.S. that have peer support programs for nurses in situations similar to mine. And I thought, boy, we really need one of those in Wisconsin. And so I started a similar program here in Wisconsin. It's a peer support program. So it's nurses in recovery talking to other nurses who may be newer to the monitoring program and the issues of losing your job and supporting your family, and just really talking to each other and supporting one another through that. I'm giving some guidelines on what you can do to get your license back and what kind of job you might be able to move into that's going to be safe. So I do that program now. All of our meetings are virtual, so nurses from anywhere can join. In fact, we had a nurse from Australia a couple of weeks ago start joining our meetings, which is really exciting.
If nurses here, so nurses who are listening to this program today, if they know someone or they have someone, you will leave some information in case they want to join your group.
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah, they can. Can I give the email address?
Sure.
Yeah,
and
sure.
Natasha will put it in the chat here.
Okay. Yeah, so the email address is wispan2021@gmail.com. It's WISPAN2021@gmail.com. And I'll put it in the chat too.
Right. Now, before we take a break and come with Terri. Terri, have you ever sat in one position for 1 hour without saying a word? You just did that.
question. Probably not.
You just did that, and congratulations. No, but before we take a break and come back with Terry, Kristin, it just goes to show how serious and observant your neck of the official and your neck of the woods are. And they decided to do so because, I mean, you turned up for work and there was HR, your manager, security.
It took 9 months, huh?
Hmm?
It took 9 months.
Yeah, but
But I guess
found,
eventually.
sheriff, I mean, calling all cars here. They just came out for you. And they dealt with it, and Terri will take us deeper into that. So thank you once again. And I put the email in the website on our Facebook page. Those of you who are joining us on YouTube and Facebook, Morning Jamaica, thank you for joining us as well. Canada, thank you too. Brooklyn, good morning to you. And we're going to take a break. And to remember, to those of you listening, remember the CTU spoken word competition is coming up. And you want what's the name of the phone? A 15?
iPhone.
I say
15.
AI. iPhone 15. And Natasha's, this is a
iPhone.
serious program. Please stop behaving like that. Let's take a break. Stop me, Tom, no laughing, Lord Jesus. Let's take a break, and when we return, we'll hear from Terri now, who will explain to you drug diversion, what it means. You've heard stories many times where patients, the Ministry of Health, they spend billions of dollars on medicine for our hospitals. Think about all the hospitals in Trinidad and Tobago that the Ministry of Education must buy medicine for, right? Health.
Ministry of Health, yes.
Right, must buy medication for. And then you will still hear people go to these institutions and say the drugs that they want, they can't get. Or the drugs are replaced with generic drugs. But they can get it privately. Is that drug diversion? When we return with Terri, we'll find out. Stay right here. You're listening to Dependency. We'll be back.
Calling all young voices. Calling all young voices. The Ministry of National Security Counter-Trafficking Unit presents Voices Against Human Trafficking, a spoken word competition in commemoration of World Day Against Trafficking in Persons 2024. We invite all secondary school students, forms 2 to 4, across Trinidad and Tobago to join the fight with your powerful words. Submit your 5-minute spoken word pieces by Friday, June 7th, 5 p.m. Top prizes include an iPhone 15, iPad Air, and Beats headset. Plus, there's also a People's Choice Award. Submissions should be in video format, accompanied by a written script sent to countertraffickingunit@gmail.com. Let's raise our voices and ensure no child is left behind. For more information, contact the CTU at 627-1339. Approved by the Ministry of Education.
Cappy, talk to you now, boy. I got a small work for you to do. Make a quick 10 G's. What you gonna do for me?
10 G's? What's that how I do this, boy?
What you doing? Taking your boat, run up the islands, pick up some people and then bring them back here for me. That's all you have to do.
That sounds like human trafficking, man. That's a serious crime. I can't make that.
Trafficking in human beings is a serious violation of a person's human rights. It violates a person's right to freedom of movement, freedom of choice, freedom of speech, and freedom of identity. It is a heinous crime which affects local, regional, and international peace and security. A victim of human trafficking is subjected to many types of abuse. The crime destroys a person's dignity and self-worth. Victims often feel hopeless, are suicidal, and are stigmatized in their communities. Child victims are deprived of their rights to education, play, and social interaction.
Eye on Dependency with Garth and Natasha.
Reality radio, at its best, where every life is a biography.
Sundays at 10 a.m. and exclusively on I-95.5 FM.
And streamed live on the Eye on Dependency Facebook page and YouTube channel.
Yes, YouTube is back up. So
Yes,
to all of our
so-
viewers on YouTube and Facebook, thank you for bearing with us. I think we are back up on
Yes,
stream.
and if you're having problems on Facebook, which normally happens on a Sunday morning for some strange reason, please just jump across to our YouTube channel, Eye on Dependency. Thank God we have that channel now, because for some reason this...
And those of you out there, we have 88 people watching, but only 11 likes. Could you all bump up the likes for us, please? And same on Facebook. Thank you.
Yes, so
now Terri, who would, as I was about to say, is probably one of those people who would have been in the room that Kristin mentioned. So start off by telling us how you got into this work with drug diversion.
Sure. Yes, she mentioned director of pharmacy or the diversion specialist. Probably, Kristin, I'm surprised you can even remember who was in that room. I can only imagine what a day that was for you.
Mm-hmm.
So as you've all mentioned, I am a pharmacist, and I've been doing that for many, many years. And for about the last 15 or so, I have been involved in drug diversion. And the way I really got started was just a schedule change. And the person who was doing it at the hospital was retiring, and they asked me if I'd like to step into the position. So I stepped in, not really understanding much of anything. I had a little bit of an eye for it. I knew it existed. And I only mention that because I think a lot of people don't think about diversion even being a thing within a hospital. And so let me just back up a little bit. Diversion is essentially when somebody takes the medication, and this could be a controlled substance, an opioid, or it could be a non-controlled substance. It could just be something that is expensive and you need it for you or your family, or you're going to turn around and sell it because you can make money for it. So drug diversion really is anything that somebody takes from the hospital that should be going to a patient or somewhere else. It's theft, essentially. It's theft of the medications. So when I first got started, I understood that substance abuse happened and that there was diversion that could even take place in a hospital. But I think some people don't put that together because they think, well, surely a healthcare professional would understand that substance abuse is bad, and would never even let themselves get into that position to put themselves at risk or to put, for goodness sakes, their patients at risk, right? And so it doesn't happen in a hospital, but that's just not true. The statistics out there that I've heard from some nursing associations in the US is that 10 to 15, and I'm hearing now even up to 20%, excuse me, of healthcare professionals will have a substance use disorder at some point in their career, whether that's drugs or alcohol. They are like the general population that has a problem. They have access to the medication, which maybe makes it a little bit easier and theoretically safer, right? Because they're not buying things on the street. They can just get it from work, and they are not immune to it. And I want to just highlight a couple of things that Kristin's, her story is just such a perfect, typical story of what you hear. And that is, the first time she experienced those substances, and as she escalated up the chain of those substances, she felt that immediate relief from those anxieties, or it could be depression, or for some people it's they're shy, and when they first take it they feel different and they can open up and they feel like everybody else. And so I think that's something really, really important to highlight, is that none of us think it's going to happen to us, but the first time we are exposed to a particular medication may be the first time that we feel at rest or at peace or relief or whatever it is. And I think that's a really key point that people need to remember, that if this happens to you and you feel that way, you need to be concerned. Because yes, it's a nice feeling, but you're the person that is going to end up with a substance abuse disorder because of that feeling, as opposed to other people that don't feel that. I have never had an issue, and I thank the Lord for that. It doesn't make me feel that way. I don't understand it from a physical perspective, but I have worked with enough people and heard enough stories that it is real, and that's where it goes from there. So that's a caution for everybody out there that has that feeling. So my job, and what it has been for quite some time, and what I do now, is I help hospitals and clinics look for ways to, I call it mitigate. Some people call it prevent, but you will never prevent all of it, but mitigate ways for people to get access to the medications to divert. So mitigate the ways that people can divert. But then we must always constantly monitor for those that find the way around that. And so, yes, I probably would have been the person in Kristin's room. Yes, I may very well have been one of the ones that said, this inventory is off. Where is this going? And that was in the background doing that investigation. But it's important work for many reasons. One, it's a patient safety issue. And we have to think of that really first and foremost, is healthcare professionals have a responsibility to keep their patients safe and to care for them. And if we are working while impaired on controlled substances, or if we are working not impaired, but all we can think about is when we are going to be able to get off shift so that we can then go home and partake in something. And so we're in a state of withdrawal at that point, finishing up our shift, then our patients are not as safe as they should be. And if you take that and you even push that out further, is some people, when, unlike Kristin, who was simply taking the waste or taking a whole vial from it, there are those that do what we call tampering. And they will take the medication and replace it with something else. Hopefully they're replacing it with something sterile, but they are not always. Sometimes it's just tap water that they are replacing, and this is for an injectable, obviously a liquid solution. Or they themselves have some sort of virus hepatitis or something, and they're reusing needles. And so then we're passing that on to the patients. And that is the most egregious. The patient is not getting their pain meds and they are being infected with other things. So we have to remember that patient safety is our first and foremost. But we also can't forget the healthcare professional that is at risk. And we need to protect them as well. We have a duty to protect them. And so facilities that don't look and don't monitor are doing both their patients and their staff a disservice because of the harm that can come to them.
If you're just joining us, you're listening to Dependency, and we are speaking with Terri, Kristin. Kristin is in Wisconsin, and Terri is in Kansas. Right, Terri?
No, actually, I'm in Wyoming.
Wyoming. Right.
Oh. Close.
Your university was in Kansas. Sorry. Right. And those of you who joined us, if you join us late, remember you can always go back to our page and get it from the beginning. But again, once we have the time, we'll show you that me put down a robbery in Tobago that was caught on video, and there's that vaping fanatic who suffered a lung collapse. We have a video of that to show you, those of you on radio. Listen carefully. But Terri, Kristin just explained her story as an addicted nurse. Fortunately for her, she received her license again, and she's now practicing a nurse again. Now Terry's explaining drug diversion. Now Terry, let me just put one thing here out, if you can explain. So could one of the reasons be, or let's say hospital is provided with, and I'm just using a number here, 10 boxes of, let's say, OxyContin, right? Is there a generic drug to that, OxyContin?
Yeah.
Right. So, and then all of a sudden it's replaced by that. All the drugs, it's not at the hospital. So when people go there with prescriptions, they have to go to private practice. Could that be drug diversion?
So are you saying replacing the drug, a brand for a generic, or replacing
Yes.
it with, say, something else?
Both.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I don't know what, in terms of brand and generic, if it's different in your country, but here brand and generic for us is essentially the same. There's a plus or minus a 10%, I believe is the number. Sometimes you will find that somebody doesn't respond as well to a generic as they do a brand for certain conditions. But overall, it's essentially the same. So I don't think that replacing, here in the US, replacing with brand and generic would be considered diversion. I guess it depends on the motive and who's doing it and what they're doing it. I haven't heard of that being done, but certainly replacing it with a lookalike. You know, oxycodone could look like, say, Tylenol, and people would replace it with Tylenol and take the oxycodone for themselves. So that would absolutely be diversion through substitution, we would call that.
Yeah, Terry, I wanted to ask as well, what in terms of your practice, what have you found that there are certain groups or classes of healthcare professionals that are more likely to engage in drug diversion, or is it across the board?
Yeah, you know, that's a really good question. And I don't know if it's necessarily the answer is more likely, or if it's because I see it more in nursing, but they are also the larger group, right? So if you just look at them statistically, they make up a tremendous amount of more staff. You know, if you compare them to pharmacists, I mean, my goodness, it doesn't even compare. So nurses, anesthesiologists, pharmacists, pharmacy technicians, sometimes they say pharmacy technicians have less to lose from a license perspective than the pharmacist. But again, you know, a nurse has a license to lose as well. And certainly an anesthesiologist, a physician, has a license and a livelihood to lose. So we see it across the board. Dentists in the US apparently as well, which I don't run across because, I mean, I'm not working with dentists and monitoring the dentists. But so we all have the propensity for it. It doesn't matter what our license is, but I think we do kind of default to nursing when we talk about it, just because they make up such a large percentage of our staff.
Right. And have you noticed as well, Kristin mentioned that she was working in an ER when she began to divert, serious amounts, quantities of drugs. Is there something specific about the environment or the department that you work in that may put you more at risk, or put the healthcare professional under more stress in the workplace?
Yes. Absolutely. I think that there's the issue of the more stress, but there's also the issue of the high risk environments that maybe we don't know the cause and effect, right? Did the nurse gravitate toward that type of area so they could have more autonomy and more access? Or did being in that area cause more stress? So then it resulted in their substance use disorder. But anytime, healthcare professionals, and you mentioned COVID earlier, there's been stress in a healthcare facility forever, right? And it's a normal, quote unquote, normal to go through that stress. And just a small example I'll share with you. we are not trained for that, or at least I never was in pharmacy school, and I've never talked to anybody who has been trained in that. But I still remember to this day, the first time I was in an emergency situation in an emergency room. I was the pharmacist that we call it, carried the code pager. So we call it a code blue when somebody, comes in and they're like on death's door. And we all respond. The team responds. You've got your physician, you've got your nurse at the bedside, you've got the pharmacist who's handling the medications and doing those things. I will never forget the first day that I was in that room when a patient didn't survive and they're dead on the table. And the physician now is looking at everybody in the room, because this is kind of the process that you go through. And he wants to do what we call the code, meaning we're going to accept that this person is dead and stop working on them. And he asked us, anybody in the room have an objection? Are you all okay with this? And looked me in the eye. And it's like, really? Like, you're asking me if I'm okay? And that was normal. That was my first time. Nobody ever prepared me for that. Nobody talked to me about it afterward. Nobody else in the room seemed to have a problem with it, right? Meanwhile, I'm thinking, oh my gosh, this person just died right in front of me. So you take that and you multiply that every single day, and especially for the nurses that are there at the bedside, and they see this over and over. And if there's no debriefing and no discussing it, and they're feeling a little bit anxious about it and upset, but they look around the room and everybody else, nobody seems to have a problem with it, right? So you assume you're the only one that is feeling this way. Meanwhile, most people are faking it too. And this is day in and day out. And so these are the kinds of stressors that build up. Now, in the emergency room, you're going to see a lot of this. In the ICU, you're going to see a lot of this. So yes, those are high risk areas because you see a lot of that type of stuff. Now, if you talk about in what we call procedural rooms, so where you're doing procedures such as the operating room or the interventional radiology type of a room, there's more autonomy for the nurses. They're at the bedside with the physician and they're kind of, more in charge of things. There's less people looking because you're in a sterile environment and it's closed off. So there's risk there for people that have a substance abuse problem. And so they have more access. Working nights, like Kristin said, she didn't want to be there during the day when she had more eyes on her. So she was very happy working nights. So that's another risky spot, is working nights. It's also when you have people that tend to do a lot of overtime. That is stressful, and that just adds to the stress. Right. So you got to be mindful of their breaks and not overwork. Just because they're willing to work doesn't mean you should give them extra shifts, right? So those are all things that come into play with it. But I think that the opportunity to de-stress and to talk about what is happening on the job is a really important part, and not enough hospitals allow a safe space for their staff to do that.
If you're just joining us, you're listening to Dependency, and we are speaking with Terri and Kristin. Terry's out there in Wyoming, Kristin out there in Wisconsin, and they are taking us through the steps of substance abuse as a medical professional, drug diversion. Kristin, Terri, before we go back to Kristin for a bit, what's the most popular drug diverted?
It's going to be the
medication,
opioids.
I should say, opioid.
Yeah, it's going to be the opioid class for sure. I think that, there's oral and then there's injectable. Injectable comes later once the substance use disorder has progressed. So I would say something along the lines of the OxyContin, oxycodone, one of those. They come in different forms, and you got your Percocets and your Vicodins and your Norco and then just straight oxycodone. So I would say that is probably a big one, and then fentanyl. Depending on where you are. Yeah.
Yes. Good morning to Cheryl. Jennifer from out there joined us from Mexico. Thank you very much. Judy, Gloria, everybody, welcome. Thank you, and please welcome our guests as well. Kristin, we talk about working nights, especially, and I could see that happening. I would have wanted to work nights too, because less chance of somebody barging in on you doing something wrong. Terri touched on some of it. Can you give us some of the signs and symptoms too, as well, that doctors and the health institutions can look out for as a nurse working in a stressful environment?
Yeah, yes, I would love to. I think it's really important that people who are working with nurses around substances like these know signs to look for, so that they can notice it in their peers or their coworkers and bring some attention to it if they do discover it. So some of the signs, as Terri said, working night shift, picking up a lot of overtime. I didn't work nights purposefully, and I didn't work in the emergency department purposefully to get access to those drugs, but it sure was convenient once I started using them to be in the emergency department and to be working nights. So things that were unusual for me that my peers could have said, boy, Chris really is having a problem with substances. Things like, all of a sudden I was taking more breaks and disappearing for longer periods of time. So as my use escalated and changed, I started using at work. Once I was using that fentanyl, I started going to the bathroom and using it at work. So people noticed that I wasn't in the office where I was supposed to be. I wasn't taking care of patients where, when I was disappearing and they couldn't get a hold of me. They would page me and I wouldn't answer. Very unusual for me. I was a very responsible, attentive nurse. I was a really good nurse. And I am again, but for a while there, they couldn't get a hold of me, which was very unusual. So I was taking more breaks and kind of disappearing. My presentation changed. So I'm a fairly friendly, outgoing person, and I became withdrawn. I became very sullen. I did not want to talk to people. I wanted to be, just kind of by myself. I was irritable. That part of that irritability came from not feeling great. Like, I did not feel well emotionally or physically. I knew I was doing something wrong, so I felt bad morally. I just was miserable. People who have a substance use issue are not happy people. It's not it's not a good place to be. It's not a good thing to be doing and feeling.
Well said.
So I felt bad. Yeah.
Well said.
And then, my scrubs were rumpled. I wasn't taking care of myself anymore. My hair was greasy. My clothes were wrinkled. I came in, all whatever, looking a mess. Again, not my normal. So those changes that you see in people slowly over time, it's not going to be one day I'm this put together great nurse, and then the next day everything's falling apart. It's a gradual change that people maybe attribute to something else. For me, they thought it was all because of my divorce and the stress I was under because of that. So they explained all of that away, gave a reason for it, instead of seeing it for what it was, which was diversion. I picked up over time. I wanted more. As things progressed, my use progressed, I wanted more drugs. I needed it. So I was very different at the end than I was even, partway through it. I was a very different person. And they noticed. They just explained it away.
Yes, thank you for sharing that. That is very important, and I just wanted to go back to Terri for a minute for her to explain the importance of hospital, clinic administrations putting systems in place, as you mentioned, to protect the healthcare professionals. Because if people are not aware of the signs and symptoms, and there's not a system or a process or program that healthcare professionals can access in their place of work to help them, then these issues will go unnoticed and untreated.
Right, yeah. And I want to add to, Kristin's signs and symptoms, as she mentioned, they progressed. So she had a problem before she started looking rumpled and unkempt. So we have to remember that as well, because we tend to think of it as somebody that, clearly looks like they're not getting enough sleep or they're not taking care of themselves. But many, many, many times you will find that it is your best nurse. And here we are picking on nurses again, but it's your best employee, right? Because they're very helpful. They volunteer for extra things. They want to help. They've won awards. The patients like them because they're that extra caring, because they, want to take your attention away from something else that they may be doing. So we need to be mindful of that as well. And so I think that the first piece of it is education to everybody in the facility that, first of all, substance use disorder is a thing and it affects healthcare professionals. And so any time that something happens in your facility, whether it's obvious or not, if it is, something that went wrong in the operating room, if it is an employee that collapses at work and you just assume it's the blood sugars or some other thing, we have to be open to the possibility that substance use disorder impairment played some role. Now, that doesn't mean that they're also diverting from the hospital, but it might mean that they are impaired and they have a substance use disorder. So education is first and foremost. And we can't assume that it happens other places, but it doesn't happen with us, because it does.
Terri, and as you say that, gambling addicts too. Now, you might have a medical professional who's not necessarily a drug addict, but they're a gambling addict, which requires the same amount of money, the same amount of time, and the same amount of push to get the drugs. So which means then, let's say, for instance, if you have a nurse or a doctor who has access to the cabinet and or that stock room, and they run themselves up in debt gambling, they can actually steal drugs and sell it too as well, correct?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And we do see that. Those are usually the larger numbers. Yeah. But if you're not looking for it, it can go on for months before anybody notices, because you're not looking for it. Yeah. So it's that, you set your processes in place that help to mitigate that. So you've got your double checks and balances, that you're looking at your inventory to make sure it was all accounted for, and what you ordered and what came in from the manufacturer actually ended up in the cabinet where it's supposed to end up. And so those are part of your checks and balances. You've got your policies that people work by, that you need to set your standards so that you can recognize when somebody is not meeting the best practice standard. And now you have something to hold them accountable for. Could it just be that they are not practicing well? They're lazy, they're careless, what have you? Yes. But could it be that there's something else? Yes. And so you need that standard to hold them accountable to. So it's setting all of those things up in the beginning to have that underlying accountability and to know what your standards are. So once you educate people to those standards, educate them to the possibility of substance use disorder with their coworkers, then you need to educate people and give them a safe space to say something if they're concerned. It's a very awkward, if I'm working with somebody that I know is going through a divorce, but they're acting a little weird, it is my tendency to just assume, well, for goodness sakes, of course, they're distressed. They've got so much going on at home. But if I have a safe space to also say, but you know what, I also noticed this, and you can tell your manager about it. And so I am concerned for this person, and know that it's safe, that it will be kept quiet, There will be an investigation off to the side, right, from the people that know what they should be looking for and investigating. And if nothing is found, then okay, fine. But if there are questions, then, you know, we can pursue it and begin the journey of getting this person help. But the peers need to feel safe speaking up and saying something, because, you know, that will ruin friendships, right? When the person is confronted, if they do have an issue and they finally own up to it and get help, it's going to be the best day of their life, because now they're on that road to recovery. But up until that point, they're going to be mad. They're going to hate you. They're, you know, so you need to provide that safe space, right? Until you get to that point.
Yes.
But then you also need to put things in place to get that person help. And Kristin had said at the beginning, she tried Alcoholics Anonymous, but she just didn't fit in and she didn't feel comfortable. So there are, you know, in the US, we have treatment centers that are specific for professionals, healthcare professionals in treatment centers with other healthcare professionals, because they're on the same educational level. They've got a lot of the same stressors. They can relate to each other. You know, you can't always relate to somebody in a different industry or a different educational level. So to put healthcare professionals together, that makes a big difference. And so when you start seeing that and being able to explore that, and as Kristin mentioned, the peer support, you know, has one for nurses. Nurses are the only ones that understand what other nurses go through and what they're struggling with in the workplace. And so that is extremely beneficial to connect them. So it's, you know, a whole process of destigmatizing, educating, knowing what some signs and symptoms are. But even if something just doesn't feel right, to say something, having a team that is in the background that can conduct those investigations and dig in deep, and then offering that assistance. You can't promise that, you know, it's all going to be great and that they're going to get their job back and their license back. It's a long road, but you at least give them that opportunity and a place to go to begin that healing process. And, you know, if there are ways to bring them back to work, as Kristin said at the beginning, there's a lot of monitoring that goes on, but there are other jobs that licensed professionals can do that don't give them access to the medications. Or it's easier to kind of monitor what they're going through. So these are all things that, you know, we really encourage healthcare facilities to think about and to implement and to work toward.
Yes, well, you kind of just answered the question I was going to ask about the healthcare setting as a workplace, and how these kinds of issues are, or how the healthcare setting is set apart from other workplaces in terms of how it treats with these kinds of issues of substance use. But I wanted to touch on very quickly a recent incident that happened in Trinidad and Tobago, and I think we mentioned it to you both when we spoke earlier, and that was the death of babies in a NICU. More than, I think it went, the number kept rising as the days went on, but we started at 7 and I think we ended up at 11 or 12. And we were concerned about the toll that would have taken on the nurses who were assigned to that NICU, and whether or not there were systems in place to not just to counsel and advise them and help them, but to enter the conversation as to whether the issue was one of negligence or just simply, happenstance or circumstance, because we've been hearing a lot of explanations as to why these things happen. And of course, because of the fact that, these are babies, it's a very sensitive issue. But my question is, I'm going to get to the question. The question is in terms of how these issues are treated when in the media, because there was a whole media storm around this story, and the focus was really on the facility and the healthcare professionals in that unit. How would you treat with these issues once they hit the media?
Yeah, we can't control the media. That's tough. I'm not even quite sure how to answer it, because the media takes it to a whole different level. The facility may be doing everything it needs to do in terms of a full investigation, because not knowing any details at all, that's just not normal what happened, right? So, you're thinking about, is it a person issue? I talked about the diversion and the tampering and infecting people. Is it something that could be narrowed down to a person and some sort of negligent issue? Is it an infection control type of issue in the unit itself that infected all of the patients? And so definitely there needs to be some investigation. And I recognize that, maybe the media is their way of raising the alarm so that the hospital can't sweep it under the rug and pretend it didn't happen. Sometimes that accountability is what is necessary. Hopefully not, certainly in a case like this. But I think that, at the end of the day, we have to recognize that there was patient harm involved. There are families that are grieving and hurting, and absolutely those healthcare professionals that didn't do anything wrong, for sure, are grieving and hurting. And that was a really, really difficult type of situation to go through. Bringing the attention doesn't help, I'm sure, because, that just complicates the issues more for that individual healthcare professional that is trying to sort that out and to discuss or to work through those feelings. But those people definitely need some major debriefing. Again, you come back to the destigmatizing, is to open up that conversation. No matter what caused all of those deaths, there are individuals that were affected and forever will be affected by being part of that event, and to
Terri?
destigmatize and be able to talk about it.
Now, Terri and Kristin, my final question for both of you before we take a break and come back. We have that video to show with the vaping person with a lung, collapsed lung, for those of you who are still interested in vaping. And I was caught on video doing a robbery in Tobago. Going to show you that if we have the time. No, because I'm seeing me doing it. This is why I'm saying I was caught on video. But
it's not good.
Here was my question. Kristin, you could answer it, and then we come back to Terri. Is there a possibility that we had a doctor here caught with 4 class A drugs on him, and he confessed to be using these drugs: mushrooms, ketamine, LSD, and ecstasy, right? He was given a slap on the wrist and he was made to walk. He's still with a conviction, however. Now, someone who uses these substances, and have you ever come across any case as a nurse, Kristin, about malpractice or somebody making a terrible mistake in the operating room or administering the wrong medicine because they too were under the influence at the time?
Yes, there are plenty of cases where nurses, nurses are the biggest group that this occurs with. But yeah, there are cases where I think the most common, at least that I've heard of, is, as Terri talked about, when folks get infected with things like hepatitis and HIV, because the person who's doing the diverting is taking that substance out and injecting it and using that same dirty needle then on that patient and causing infections. But there are probably many more instances that we don't even know about, because we don't realize that the error that's happened is because of substance use. And I think when you talk about that physician that was using substances that he didn't get from the hospital, he got those outside of the hospital, right? We don't carry mushrooms in the hospital. That happens a lot too. Nurses are not only impaired with drugs that they get in their environment, but they could be impaired from drugs they've used outside. We just had a case with a nurse here that was using methamphetamine outside of the hospital, had a issue in the hospital that had nothing to do with that, but that they drug tested him and found that drug. So he was disciplined for that because understandably he's testing positive while at work. So he's working under the influence of a drug that he shouldn't be using ever, let alone while he's working. So it does happen. We really have no idea of how much or the instance that it really is occurring. It's a lot more than we realize, I think.
Terri?
Yes, I agree with Kristin, and I think I will add to that there is a lot that we don't know about, especially when it comes to physicians. We have here in the US what they call a peer protected review. And so even in the facilities where I've worked and I've helped monitor, if we suspect a physician of something, it goes kind of behind the veil to the peer review, and they are reviewed by their peers. Now, I recently did a podcast with a physician's recovery group, and they made me feel a lot better about it, about the treatment process for physicians, and that they do take it seriously. They have a lot of success with it. But the bottom line is we don't know what's happening in the operating room necessarily. And I always tell facilities and their diversion specialists, make friends with your risk department, because they know if something weird has happened in the operating room. And as I said before, we have to consider substance use disorder as the underlying reason for lots of things that happen. We can't just rule it out. We have to think, could this have been that they were impaired? So I'm sure things happen, but we don't hear about it. It's kept pretty quiet and private, unless it reaches a court of law, of course, and then, we'll hear about it there.
Yes, because we have the doctors. Terri, Shortman, just go to audio C for me, please. Because we have doctors who use alcohol as well. Most of them love vodka because they don't smell it. And sometimes it reflects in their behavior. After this, we'll go to a break. And when we return, we'll play those videos for you. And then wrap up with Kristin and Terri, who did a fantastic job here this morning, educating us once again. Let's go to that audio, please, Shortman.
Hey, Ollie, I look into the room, Who riding with me?
What? Oh gosh, you could mash up a line, my boy.
Yeah, cause he's still, We coming, bro. But first, one for the road.
Yeah, I real good, my brother. I have to drive Ollie home. And besides, it's a police on the road.
You're a soft man, or what? Boy, throw back the drink,
Well, I'm told you, boy, I am the designated driver and I must be responsible. So let rest me without talking now. Let we go.
Okay, now, boss. Okay, we coming.
Drinking and driving can have devastating consequences. Think before you drink. A message from Eye on Dependency.
Yeah, but isn't it true that that's one of the PSAs that they didn't want us to play to, folks?
Yep.
Strange enough. All right, so those of you who joined us, you're very late because we're almost at the end of the program, but you can, as soon as we're done, it's posted on our YouTube and Facebook page. You can go back to it, get it from the beginning, because we had a very long rant at the beginning, especially me. So let's go to that break, and when we return, we play those videos for you, and then we wrap up with Kristin and Terri. We'll be back.
And we take your calls.
And we take if we have time.
Yeah.
Calling all young voices. Calling all young voices. The Ministry of National Security Counter-Trafficking Unit presents Voices Against Human Trafficking, a spoken word competition in commemoration of World Day Against Trafficking in Persons 2024. We invite all secondary school students, forms 2 to 4, across Trinidad and Tobago to join the fight with your powerful words. Submit your 5-minute spoken word pieces by Friday, June 7th, 5 p.m. Top prizes include an iPhone 15, iPad Air, and Beats headset. Plus, there's also a People's Choice Award. Submissions should be in video format, accompanied by a written script sent to countertraffickingunit@gmail.com. Let's raise our voices and ensure no child is left behind. For more information, contact the CTU at 627-1339. Approved by the Ministry of Education.
Thank you for staying with us. This is Eye on Dependency. We're on our last legs this morning, and we wanted to share another video with you just to reinforce the point about vaping.
And the dangers of it.
And the dangers
It's
of
not
it.
fun. Listen to this. Yes, so what
6 people have died and hundreds more have gotten sick because of a vaping-related lung illness. Well, tonight we're talking to a man who used his vape every day from the time he was 15 until, by the age of 21, he had 2 collapsed lungs. He tells Contact 7 investigator David Clue you should not trust the claim that vaping is a safe alternative to smoking.
I would always argue how safe it was until it took effect on me.
1 year ago, the self-proclaimed vaping fanatic suffered a collapsed left lung.
At this time, I didn't think vaping had anything to do with it, and I told him that, so I didn't stop.
No, he did not.
I liked the clouds, the nicotine.
Then this summer, his love of vaping collapsed, along with his right lung.
My chest just got really tight, and then I felt a sharp pain come through my back up to my chest.
His choice of whether to quit had been flanked by his addiction.
Now I believe it's vaping because it's the only thing I'm doing.
His 6 days in the hospital costing his family thousands and costing him 30% of that right lung. A smoker gets the benefit of years of coughing, loss of taste and smell, warnings that something worse is on the horizon. But for vapors like Kyle, symptoms don't include a heads up. And we could be years from understanding why.
Until we know a lot more information about exactly what ingredient is in the vape juice that's causing these deaths or serious illnesses, the best advice is to stay away from vaping.
That's terrible news for the vaping industry, still untested, unregulated, and now under tremendous scrutiny. Still, 40% of Denver teens have tried vaping, and half of those were still vaping this month. Kyle Lano sees that kind of statistic and pictures an entire generation clouded by false claims and fancy flavors, only to see the true costs coming into focus far too late.
We have our whole lives ahead of us, and we're going to end up on oxygen in our 20s, 30s.
That was David Clue reporting.
All right, people, so you see for yourself, you still have the final decision to make about vaping. And remember, you can get popcorn lung as well. So you decide. We are not going to, that's like I said, I sparring right now. The uppercut and left hook and all kind. I saving that for Jungle Boogie. Kristin, could you tell us, can we wrap up your final word to us, the people of Trinidad and Tobago? Thank you very much for your time once again.
Well, I'm so grateful. Thank you for having me here and letting me share a little bit of my story. I just really want to encourage folks to get the care that they need. So if you're struggling with substances, whether you're a healthcare professional or not, please get help, get some support. There is really a lot of help out there. If you're a healthcare professional and you want to talk to somebody, you can reach out to me. My email address and our website is in the Facebook chat anyway. There's help out there. You have to ask for it, but you don't have to keep suffering. You can get help before things get so bad that your whole world is, crashing down around you. Please get help.
Well said. Terri?
Thank you.
Thank you for having me on. And I want to thank Kristin and people like her that are in recovery that share their story, because that has been so important for me on my journey on the other side of the table as the person who's monitoring for it. Because I will admit that at the beginning for me, it was about the hunt, finding that healthcare professional that was diverting and you're gone. But over the years, as I've heard more and more stories and I've seen more and more success with recovery, it has completely changed my perspective. I do feel that we do still need to protect the patient, but now I also feel that we need to protect that healthcare professional and get them help. And it certainly doesn't have to be the end of their career. So for those of you out there that maybe are feeling like, they deserve those felonies and deserve to be put in jail, I get it. I've kind of been on that end at the very beginning, but I appreciate those stories. And there is a lot that we can do from a proactive perspective in our facilities to set the facility up for success and to protect our patients and staff. So I would encourage you to do that. And, I also have a podcast that I do regularly, and it's all on this topic, and it will give some ideas and suggestions for healthcare facilities. So check that out if it's a topic that you're interested in and you're coming from that perspective and you need some ideas. That the name of that is Drug Diversion Insights with Terri Bedals. And so that may be helpful. But thank you for having me on.
And also, Kristin, if nurses want to join your group, we've also put your email address in the chat here so that they can too kind of have access to you to get help if they need. And we thank you both so much once again for being good sports and good support for what we do here on Dependency.
Indeed.
We're always grateful to have you on our program, and we wish you all the best in the future.
Yep.
Natasha?
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you for what you do there.
You're welcome.
You're
You're
most
welcome. And those of you on YouTube, happened this week at robbery in Tobago. Now somebody brandished what seemed to be a firearm. Two attendants inside there. He took the tray from the cash register, and you're going to see him running with it in a minute. This is what I did back then, just that we didn't have firearm. We didn't use firearm. As a matter of fact, if nobody wasn't there, was better for me. I didn't want any confrontation. I was a coward kind of thief, trying to get my hit, my fix. But it's getting more and more blatant. You see what? He's running in broad daylight with this tray, and I am willing to bet my last dollar that this is a drug addict. I am sure of it. And if he's caught and tested, maybe we'll find out, but normally they don't do that.
You will never know.
We will never know. So, unfortunately. But that's what it is, and I hope he gets the help he needs. Kristin and Terri, once again, thank you so much. Give our regards to the folks in the U.S., Wisconsin, and Wyoming. And we'll see you another time.
Have a great day.
Take care. Have a great day.
Thank you.
We have major news up next with Mr. Sterling Henderson.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.